My name is Ethan Mitchell, and I'm 20 years old. Yesterday, I found an old family photo tucked in a book. It brought back the memory of those words my sister Amber said during Thanksgiving dinner last year. "You've never really belonged in this family." What hurt more was seeing my parents nod in agreement. That night, I packed my bags and walked away without a word. Sometimes the loudest statement is silence. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, and hit that like and subscribe button to join me as I share how I rebuilt my life after being erased from my own family. Growing up in suburban Boston, our family looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Thomas and Sarah Mitchell, had respectable jobs, Dad as an accountant and Mom as a high school English teacher. We lived in a colonial-style house with a manicured lawn and hosted neighborhood barbecues every summer. But inside those walls, I always felt like an extra puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. From my earliest memories, the difference in how my parents treated me and my younger sister Amber was subtle but unmistakable. Amber, only 2 years younger than me, was everything I wasn't: outgoing, athletic, and naturally charismatic. She played soccer and volleyball, collected friends effortlessly, and lit up every room she entered. I was the opposite: quiet, introspective, and most comfortable with a book or behind a camera lens. When I was 8, I won first place in a school science fair. My project on light refraction and photography earned me a blue ribbon and a special certificate. I remember racing home, certificate clutched in my small hands, bursting through the front door to tell my parents. Mom was helping Amber with her soccer cleats in the living room. "Mom, Dad! I won first place!" I announced, breathless with excitement. Mom glanced up briefly. "That's nice, honey. Put it on the fridge if you want." Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. "Good job, kiddo." That same evening, when Amber scored her first goal at soccer practice, my parents made a celebration dinner and called my grandparents to share the news. It wasn't that they were cruel or neglectful. They provided everything I needed materially. But their emotional investment clearly flowed toward Amber. At parent-teacher conferences, they beamed with pride at her social skills while giving perfunctory nods at my straight A's. When I made honor roll consistently throughout middle school, it was expected rather than celebrated. My attempt to gain their approval through academic excellence became a pattern. I worked harder, stayed up later, and pushed myself to excel in every class. By 8th grade, I was taking advanced math and science courses. My teachers suggested I might be gifted, but my parents dismissed it as me just being bookish. Around 13, I discovered photography. Our school had an old darkroom that was rarely used, and Mr. Reynolds, the art teacher, showed me how to develop black and white film. The first time I watched an image appear on blank paper in the developing tray, something clicked inside me. I'd found my medium, my voice. I saved up allowance money and did odd jobs around the neighborhood until I could afford a second-hand Canon camera. Photography became my refuge. Through the viewfinder, I controlled what was seen and what remained invisible. I could frame the world exactly as I experienced it, finding beauty in overlooked corners, capturing emotions others walked past. When I showed my parents my photos, Dad called it a nice hobby, while Mom worried it would distract from real studies. The only person who truly saw me was my grandmother Grace, my mother's mother. Unlike my parents, Grandma Grace celebrated my differences. She would sit for hours looking through my photo collections, asking questions about my techniques and perspectives. She bought me photography books and subscribed to National Geographic specifically so I could study the images. "You see the world differently, Ethan," she told me once while we sat on her porch swing. "That's not something to fix or change. It's your gift." When Grandma Grace died during my sophomore year of high school, I lost my only ally. At her funeral, I stood slightly apart from my family, camera hanging around my neck because I couldn't bear to leave it at home. My mother noticed and hissed, "Can't you be normal for one day? Put that thing away." I did, but not before taking one last photo of the willow tree bending over Grandma's grave. That photo later won a youth photography contest, but I never told my family. My high school graduation should have been a moment of triumph. Valedictorian with a full scholarship to USC's prestigious film and photography program. But at my graduation dinner, my parents spent more time discussing Amber's junior year volleyball championship and her prospects for athletic scholarships than my accomplishments or upcoming cross-country move. "California is so far," my mother said, finally acknowledging my impending departure. "Are you sure you wouldn't be happier at Boston University? You could live at home and save money." But living at home was the last thing I wanted. USC's acceptance letter had felt like a jailbreak, a chance to escape the constant feeling of being invisible in my own home. In California, perhaps I could finally step out of the shadows and become the person I was meant to be, not the afterthought in my family's narrative. "I need to go," was all I said. And in August, I boarded a plane with 2 suitcases, my camera equipment, and no tears shed at the airport by anyone in my family. Landing in Los Angeles felt like stepping into another dimension. The palm trees, the constant sunshine, and most importantly, the absence of my family's expectations created an intoxicating sense of freedom. USC's campus buzzed with creative energy that immediately resonated with my soul in a way Boston never had. My roommate assignment turned out to be one of those random strokes of luck that can change the trajectory of a life. Jason Parker was a film major from Seattle with an infectious laugh and boundless enthusiasm for art in all its forms. The first night in our dorm room, we stayed up until 4 a.m. discussing Kubrick films and comparing photography techniques. "Dude, these are incredible," Jason said, scrolling through my portfolio on my laptop. "You've got a really unique eye." It was such a simple comment, but hearing someone appreciate my artistic perspective without qualification or comparison sent a warm current through my chest. I hadn't realized how starved I was for that kind of recognition. Over the next few weeks, Jason introduced me to his growing circle of friends, other creative types who accepted me without question. For the first time, I experienced what it felt like to be wanted in a social group rather than merely tolerated. We spent weekends exploring hidden corners of Los Angeles with our cameras, critiquing each other's work with honest but supportive feedback. Meanwhile, contact with my family dwindled to obligatory holiday calls. My mother would spend 5 minutes asking surface-level questions about my classes before passing the phone to my father, who would remind me about being responsible with money, then quickly hand off to Amber, who usually had some exciting news to share about her volleyball scholarship prospects or social life. I'd check their social media occasionally and see posts of family gatherings I hadn't been invited to. Weekend trips to the Cape, Thanksgiving with extended family, even my father's birthday dinner. The exclusion stung, but part of me was relieved not to endure another event where I felt like a stranger among my own blood relatives. In my sophomore year, I took an advanced photography seminar with Professor Robert Walsh, a renowned documentary photographer whose work had been featured in major publications worldwide. Something about my black and white series on homeless veterans caught his attention. "Mitchell," he said after class one day, "I'd like to discuss your work further. Office hours tomorrow?" That meeting changed everything. Professor Walsh became the mentor I'd always craved. He pushed me technically while encouraging the emotional authenticity in my work. Under his guidance, I developed a distinct style that combined technical precision with emotional storytelling. "Photography isn't just about capturing what something looks like," he told me during one critique session. "It's about capturing what it feels like." By junior year, my work was being featured in student exhibitions, and by senior year, I had my first solo show at a small gallery near campus. Professor Walsh brought several gallery owners and magazine editors to the opening. Standing there among my framed photographs, accepting congratulations and discussing my artistic choices with people who took my work seriously, I felt a profound sense of validation. I invited my family to the exhibition, sending a formal invitation with a personal note about how much their presence would mean to me. My mother called a week before the event. "We're so sorry, Ethan, but we just can't make it. Amber has a volleyball tournament that weekend, and you know how important these games are for her scholarship opportunities. But we're very proud of you, of course." Of course. The familiar disappointment settled in my stomach, but it was dulled by time and distance. Jason and my other friends showed up in force, along with Professor Walsh, and even some of my other instructors. Their genuine excitement and pride filled the gallery, and I realized I'd built something precious in California, a community that valued me for exactly who I was. My graduation ceremony arrived in a blur of black robes and California sunshine. My parents did fly out for it, bringing Amber along. They sat stiffly during the ceremony, made appropriate comments about the campus being nice, and took the requisite photos. But they booked an early flight back the next morning because Amber had an important team practice she couldn't miss. As I watched their taxi pull away from my apartment building, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The distance between us was no longer just geographical. We had become different people living different lives, connected by nothing more than shared DNA and fading memories. I turned back to my apartment where Jason and our friends were preparing a proper graduation celebration, and I chose to focus on the family I had found rather than the one I had lost. After graduation, I landed a job as a junior photographer at Frame, a prestigious photography magazine based in Seattle. The position offered creative freedom, decent pay, and the opportunity to learn from some of the best photographers in the industry. Following Jason, who had secured a job at an independent film studio in the same city, I packed my life into my used Honda Civic and drove north, ready for the next chapter. Seattle's moody skies, lush landscapes, and vibrant art scene provided endless inspiration. My small apartment in Capitol Hill became both home and studio, walls covered with prints and inspiration boards. Within 6 months, I was contributing regularly to the magazine, my photo essays on urban transformation and community resilience earning positive feedback from readers and editors alike. It was at a gallery opening for a collective exhibition that included some of my work that I met Lauren Reynolds. I noticed her studying one of my photographs. A black and white image of an elderly man feeding pigeons in a rain-soaked park, his face creased with lines that told stories of both sorrow and joy. "This one makes me feel both sad and hopeful at the same time," she said, not realizing I was standing beside her. "I can't quite explain why. That's exactly what I was trying to capture," I replied. She turned, slightly startled, then smiled when I explained it was my photograph. Lauren had intelligent eyes and an easy laugh. She worked as a children's book illustrator, creating watercolor worlds that helped young readers process complex emotions through visual storytelling. We talked for hours that night, discovering a shared language of images and unspoken understanding. Our relationship developed naturally, weekends spent exploring hidden corners of the city with our respective tools, my camera, her sketchbook. Lauren understood my need for quiet reflection and creative space in a way no previous partner ever had. She never took it personally when I disappeared into my thoughts or spent hours editing photos, because she did the same with her illustrations. 3 months after we started dating, Lauren invited me to Sunday dinner with her family. I arrived at her parents' craftsman-style home with a bottle of wine and considerable anxiety. My experiences with family gatherings were uniformly uncomfortable affairs filled with strained conversations and unmet expectations. Robert and Elizabeth Reynolds shattered those expectations within minutes. They welcomed me with genuine warmth, asked thoughtful questions about my photography, and shared stories of Lauren's childhood with affectionate humor rather than judgment or comparison. Her younger brother Mark showed me his drone photography hobby, seeking advice and recommendations. Throughout the evening, I kept waiting for the familiar tension to surface, but it never came. "Your family is amazing," I told Lauren on the drive home. "They're pretty great," she agreed. "They really liked you, by the way." "How can you tell?" "Dad brought out the good scotch. That's always the sign." As my career advanced, I began receiving recognition beyond the magazine. My series on Seattle's homeless youth was picked up by a national publication, and I was invited to speak at photography conferences and university programs. Frame promoted me to senior photographer with my own regular column and greater creative control over my assignments. Each milestone felt significant, and I found myself wanting to share these achievements with my parents despite our strained relationship. I sent them copies of magazines featuring my work, links to online articles about exhibitions I participated in, even a short documentary that a local filmmaker had created about my process. The responses, when they came, were predictably lukewarm. "Glad your hobby is going well," my father wrote in a brief email. My mother occasionally called with distracted congratulations before steering the conversation toward Amber's latest accomplishments: her new coaching position, her engagement to a successful real estate developer, the house they were building in an exclusive neighborhood. Lauren noticed my disappointment after these interactions, though I tried to hide it. "You know," she said one evening as we prepared dinner in our now shared apartment, "it's okay to admit that their approval still matters to you." "It shouldn't," I replied, focusing intently on chopping vegetables. "I'm nearly 30 years old with a successful career and a great life. I shouldn't need their validation." "Shoulds are dangerous," Lauren said gently. "Feelings don't follow rules or logic. They just are." Her understanding created space for me to acknowledge the lingering hurt, the child inside who still longed for his parents to see him, really see him. One night, after a particularly difficult phone call with my mother, who had spent 15 minutes detailing Amber's wedding plans before asking a single question about my life, Lauren made a suggestion. "What if we visit them for Thanksgiving? A short trip, just 3 days. Maybe seeing your life through my eyes might help them understand you better." The idea terrified and tempted me in equal measure. I hadn't been home in nearly 3 years, making excuses about work commitments to avoid holidays and family events. But Lauren's presence felt like armor with her beside me. Perhaps I could face my family dynamics with new strength. "We could try," I agreed cautiously. "But don't expect miracles." "No miracles," she promised. "Just an opportunity for connection. And if it's terrible, we'll make up an emergency and leave early." I booked our flights that night, feeling a mix of dread and fragile hope. Perhaps, with Lauren by my side, something might finally change in the Mitchell family dynamic. Perhaps, at last, they might see me. The flight to Boston felt increasingly like a mistake with each passing mile. Lauren sensed my growing anxiety and kept her hand firmly in mine, occasionally squeezing it reassuringly. We had rented a car rather than asking my parents to pick us up, giving ourselves the freedom to escape if necessary. "Remember, we can leave any time," Lauren whispered as we pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. It looked exactly as I remembered: pristine white colonial with black shutters and a wreath on the front door. My mother's garden, now dormant for winter, remained meticulously maintained. Before I could knock, the door swung open to reveal my sister Amber, looking polished in a cashmere sweater and designer jeans, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves. "You made it!" she exclaimed with a brightness that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her hug was brief and formal before she turned her attention to Lauren. "And you must be the girlfriend. Mom's been curious about you." "Lauren," I corrected firmly. "Her name is Lauren." The interior of the house had been updated since my last visit: new furniture, different art on the walls, not a single one of my photographs displayed despite the collections I'd sent over the years. My parents emerged from the kitchen, my mother wiping her hands on an apron, my father carrying a glass of scotch. "Ethan," my mother said, embracing me stiffly, "you look thin. Are you eating properly out there?" My father gave me a firm handshake. "Son, good flight?" The preliminary small talk was excruciating: weather comparisons, comments about holiday traffic, questions about our hotel. Lauren handled it with remarkable grace, complimenting my mother's home and engaging my father in conversation about Seattle's business climate. I watched her charm them effortlessly and felt a surge of gratitude mixed with a strange sadness. Why was it so hard for me to connect with my own parents when Lauren could do it within minutes of meeting them? Dinner was a showcase of my mother's traditional cooking skills: turkey with all the trimmings, served on the good china with crystal glasses and silver that had belonged to my grandmother. As we settled around the table, I noticed my place setting was at the far end, away from the center of conversation where my parents and Amber sat clustered together. Before we eat, my father announced, raising his wine glass, I'd like to toast Amber's big news. She just got promoted to head coach at Westfield High, the youngest in the school's history. We couldn't be prouder. Glasses clinked as congratulations flowed. I joined in sincerely. Despite our complicated relationship, I never resented Amber's success. Actually, Lauren said during a lull in the conversation, Ethan has some exciting news too. She looked at me encouragingly. I hesitated, then said, I recently won the Harmon Fellowship for Documentary Photography. It's a pretty significant recognition in the industry. That's wonderful, my mother said without looking up from her plate. Amber, tell Lauren about the new house you and Derek are building. And just like that, my achievement was brushed aside. Lauren's eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her composure. Throughout the meal, she attempted several times to redirect conversation toward my work or our life in Seattle, but each attempt was politely acknowledged and swiftly diverted back to Amber's wedding plans, my father's golf game, or my mother's community board position. After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. Family photos adorned every surface: Amber's graduation, her engagement, my parents' anniversary trip. I appeared in only one, a formal family portrait taken when I was about 16, standing slightly apart from the others with an awkward half-smile. So, my father said, settling into his armchair, when are you going to get a real job, Ethan? Photography is fine for your 20s, but you're approaching 30. Time to think about stability. Before I could respond, Amber laughed. Dad, this is Ethan we're talking about. He's always marched to his own weird drummer. I have a real job, I replied evenly. I'm a senior photographer at one of the most respected publications in the country. I have health insurance, a retirement plan, and I do work I'm passionate about. But is it really a career? My mother pressed. Something you can build a family on? Lauren's hand found mine. Actually, Ethan's work is exceptional. He's being recognized nationally now, and his income is quite stable. We're doing very well. A brief, uncomfortable silence followed before Amber began reminiscing about childhood Thanksgivings, stories that invariably positioned her as the charming center of family lore while I was cast as the odd, awkward counterpoint. Remember when Ethan refused to play football with the cousins and just sat taking pictures of bugs instead? She laughed. Uncle Frank was so confused. Or when he wore that black turtleneck to Christmas when he was 15. My mother added, going through his artistic phase. Each anecdote stripped away another layer of my composure. Lauren's grip on my hand tightened, her thumb rubbing soothing circles against my skin. You know, Amber continued, wine glass in hand, I always told my friends that Ethan was adopted, because he was just so different from the rest of us. It was the only explanation that made sense. Amber, my mother said with a weak protest that sounded more like agreement. What? It's true, Amber persisted. He never liked the things we liked, never wanted to join in family activities. Even now, he lives as far away as possible and barely keeps in touch. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You've never really belonged in this family, have you, Ethan? The room went silent. I waited for my parents to object, to defend me, to say anything that might counter my sister's cruel assessment. Instead, my father cleared his throat. Well, you've always been separate from us, Ethan. You know that. We tried to include you, but you preferred your own company. My mother nodded. We did our best, but you were just so different. Not like the rest of us. The words landed like physical blows. All these years, I'd wondered if I was imagining the distance, if perhaps my own sensitivity had created the gulf between us. Now they were confirming what I'd always feared: I truly was an outsider in my own family, and they preferred it that way. Lauren stood abruptly. I'm sorry, but that's absolutely unfair and untrue. Ethan is thoughtful, talented, and deeply caring. If you can't see those qualities, that's your loss, not his failing. Lauren, please, my mother said with a tight smile. You've only known him for what, a year? We've raised him. We know who he is. Do you? Lauren challenged. Because from what I've seen tonight, you've made no effort to know the man he's become. You've dismissed his considerable professional success, ignored his attempts to connect, and now you're actually suggesting he doesn't belong in his own family. What kind of parents do that? My father's face darkened. Young lady, I don't think you understand family dynamics or history here. Ethan has always been difficult, always kept himself apart. Because you gave him no choice. Lauren's voice rose. You've clearly favored Amber from the beginning. Even tonight you couldn't give him 5 minutes of recognition before turning the conversation back to her. That's not true, my mother protested weakly. I found my voice at last. Actually, it is true. It always has been. My voice was quiet but steady. I spent my childhood trying to earn your attention and approval. Nothing was ever enough. Not valedictorian, not full scholarships, not national recognition for my work. You've made it very clear where your priorities lie. Amber rolled her eyes. Here comes the victim routine again. Something inside me went very still and quiet. In that moment, looking at their defensive, dismissive expressions, I realized nothing would ever change. No achievement, no effort on my part would ever bridge this gap. The liberation in that understanding was sudden and complete. You know what? You're right, I said calmly. I don't belong here. I never have. And that's not my failure, it's yours. I stood up, taking Lauren's hand. We're going to head back to our hotel now. Thank you for dinner. As we left the living room, the argument erupted behind us, my mother's protests, my father's defensive anger, Amber's accusations. But for the first time in my life, their words couldn't touch me. I had finally accepted what they had always believed: I didn't belong in their family. And remarkably, that was okay. Once upstairs in my childhood bedroom, I felt strangely calm. The room had been partially converted to a home office, with just the bed and dresser remaining from my youth. My presence had been literally diminished in this space, much as it had been emotionally diminished downstairs. Are you okay? Lauren asked, concern etching her features. Surprisingly, yes, I replied, opening the closet where I'd stored my suitcase. I think I finally understand that this isn't something I can fix. It never was. I began methodically packing our belongings while the voices continued to rise and fall downstairs. Lauren sat on the edge of the bed, watching me with a mixture of concern and admiration. You don't have to leave like this, she said softly. We could talk to them again tomorrow when everyone's calmer. I shook my head. We've been having variations of the same conversation my entire life. Nothing changes. Nothing will change. I paused, holding a sweater midway to my suitcase. I'm done trying to earn a place at a table where I'm not wanted. As I continued packing, I noticed a storage box under the bed that I recognized as mine. Pulling it out, I found childhood photographs, school awards, and early attempts at photography that I'd left behind when I went to college. My mother had kept these things, yet hidden them away rather than displaying them alongside Amber's trophies and certificates. I selected a few photographs, one of Grandma Grace on her porch swing, another of the willow tree at her funeral, and a self-portrait I'd taken at 16 when I first started to find my voice as a photographer. The rest I left behind. Those fragments of my past no longer defined me. On the dresser, I found a notepad with the Mitchell family monogram. I wrote a brief note. You're right. I don't belong here. I added our hotel information for the rental car keys I would leave, signed my name, and placed it on the pillow. Lauren and I carried our bags downstairs quietly. The argument in the living room had shifted to my mother crying and my father consoling her, with Amber's voice rising occasionally in indignation. None of them noticed as we slipped out the front door, closing it softly behind us. In the rental car, the full weight of what had just happened finally hit me. My hand shook as I tried to insert the key in the ignition. Lauren gently took the keys and moved to the driver's seat without a word. We were halfway to the hotel when the emotions finally broke through my carefully constructed calm. I covered my face with my hands as tears came, not delicate, cinematic tears, but ugly, wrenching sobs that seemed to rise from the deepest part of me. Lauren pulled into a gas station parking lot and held me while I released decades of accumulated hurt, rejection, and finally acceptance. "I'm sorry," I gasped when I could speak again. "Don't you dare apologize," she said fiercely. "Not for this. Not ever for this." At the hotel, we crawled into bed without turning on the lights. Lauren held me, her presence an anchor in the storm of emotions. "What now?" she whispered into the darkness. "Now we go home," I replied. "Our real home." We changed our flights and left Boston the next morning. My phone remained silent that night and throughout the following day. It wasn't until we landed in Seattle that the first message came through, a text from my mother asking where we had gone and why we had left without saying goodbye. The lack of self-awareness was so profound it was almost comical. Back in our apartment, surrounded by the life we had built together, I began to process what had happened. The initial numbness gave way to waves of grief, anger, and eventually, a strange sense of peace. I had finally stopped trying to belong somewhere I was never wanted and accepted the truth that had been staring me in the face since childhood. After a week, the calls started. First from my mother, then my father. I let them go to voicemail, listening to their halting, awkward messages that never quite included an apology or acknowledgement of what had transpired. They spoke as if I had simply overreacted to a minor slight rather than responding to a lifetime of emotional neglect culminating in explicit rejection. Lauren gave me space to process, but remained a steadfast presence. "Whatever you decide about contact with them, I support you," she assured me. "There's no handbook for this. You get to write your own rules now." 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I returned to work with a new photo series concept. Titled Belonging, it would explore the complex nature of found family versus biological connections. My editor approved it immediately, recognizing the emotional resonance of the theme. Over the next several months, I channeled my experience into my art, photographing diverse groups of people who had created family bonds beyond traditional structures. Long-term friends who had aged together, communities formed around shared passions, chosen families in the LGBTQ+ community, and others who had built connections by choice rather than blood. The work became a form of therapy, each photograph helping me redefine what family truly meant. I declined further calls from my parents and sister, establishing a boundary that protected the healing process I had begun. It wasn't about punishment but preservation of the fragile new self I was cultivating, one who didn't measure his worth by their validation. Lauren suggested I might benefit from professional support, and I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family estrangement. Dr. Winters helped me understand that my experience was far from unique and that the grief I felt was both valid and necessary. "Estrangement isn't a failure," she explained during one session. "Sometimes it's the healthiest choice when relationships become harmful." The cultural narrative that family must be preserved at all costs doesn't serve everyone. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, I received an email from my father. The subject line read simply, "Financial assistance." He explained that they had invested heavily in Amber and Derek's new house, and now faced unexpected tax complications. Could I loan them $15,000 until things stabilized? The request was so breathtakingly tone-deaf that I actually laughed out loud when I read it. There was no acknowledgement of our estrangement, no mention of the Thanksgiving disaster, not even a perfunctory, "How are you?" Just an expectation that I would provide financial support despite everything. My response was brief but firm. "I'm not in a position to offer financial assistance. I suggest speaking with a financial advisor about your situation. I wish you well." It was the most contact I had allowed myself with them since November, and I felt proud of maintaining clear boundaries without cruelty. That summer, Lauren's extended family held a reunion at a lakeside property in Washington. She asked if I would feel comfortable attending, assuring me there was no pressure. I decided to go, curious about what a healthy family gathering might feel like. The weekend was revelatory. 3 generations of the Reynolds family together, with all the normal tensions and disagreements that any family experiences, but underpinned by genuine affection and respect. People disagreed without dismissing each other. Achievements were celebrated equally, regardless of who accomplished them. Most strikingly, differences were not just tolerated but appreciated as adding richness to the family tapestry. On our last night there, Lauren's father found me on the dock, watching the sunset over the lake. "You know," he said, settling beside me, "Lauren told us a bit about your family situation." I tensed slightly, prepared for platitudes about blood being thicker than water or the importance of reconciliation. Instead, he surprised me. "I want you to know that family is about how people treat each other, not just shared DNA. You're welcome here, Ethan. Anytime, for any reason." The simple acceptance in his words brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," was all I could manage. "No thanks needed," he replied, patting my shoulder as he stood. "That's what family does." Later that night, in our cabin, I asked Lauren to marry me. I hadn't planned it, had no ring prepared, but the certainty in my heart couldn't wait. She said yes immediately, eyes shining with tears and joy. We agreed we would find rings together later. The commitment was what mattered, not the trappings. As we fell asleep that night, I realized I had finally found where I belong. It wasn't in the house where I grew up or with the people who shared my name. It was here, with this woman who saw me completely and loved what she saw, and with people who made room for me at their table without conditions or comparisons. Back in Seattle, life took on new dimensions. Lauren and I began planning our wedding, something small and meaningful rather than traditional and showy. We decided on a ceremony at Volunteer Park Conservatory, surrounded by lush greenery and bathed in natural light perfect for photographs. I continued therapy sessions with Dr. Winters, working through the complex emotions that surfaced as I established my new life. There were still difficult days when childhood memories would ambush me, leaving me questioning my worth or decisions. On those days, I learned to be gentle with myself, to acknowledge the pain without letting it define me. Grief isn't linear, Dr. Winters reminded me during one particularly tough session after a dream about my grandmother. You're mourning not just the relationship you had with your family, but the one you wished you could have had. That's a profound loss. My Belonging photo series gained attention in the photography world, with several prominent galleries expressing interest in exhibiting the work. Frame dedicated a special issue to the project, featuring my photographs alongside essays about chosen family and community. The response from readers was overwhelming, hundreds of messages from people who saw their own stories reflected in my images. 6 months after Thanksgiving, I received an unexpected email from a family friend named Margaret Wilson. She had been my mother's college roommate and had known me since birth. "I saw your photo series in Frame," she wrote. "It moved me deeply and also troubled me, because I recognized the subtext. I've watched the dynamics in your family since you were small, Ethan, and I've never felt right about how you were treated. There's something I think you should know, if you're open to hearing it." I hesitated before responding, wary of being pulled back into family drama. Lauren encouraged me to at least hear what Margaret had to say, reminding me that information couldn't hurt me unless I allowed it to. We arranged to meet Margaret during her business trip to Seattle. Over coffee at a quiet cafe, she shared what she knew. "Your parents both come from deeply dysfunctional families," she explained. "Your father's father was an alcoholic who valued masculine pursuits above all else. He constantly belittled your father for his interest in accounting rather than sports or manual trades. Your mother's parents were strictly religious and emotionally cold, particularly toward her younger sister who was more free-spirited." I listened, trying to understand what this had to do with me. "When you were born," Margaret continued, "you had this thoughtful, observant quality even as an infant. You reminded your father of himself before his father's criticism crushed his spirit. And as you grew and showed artistic tendencies, you reminded your mother of her sister, who eventually left the family and rarely returned." She sighed, looking into her coffee cup. "I think they unconsciously pulled away from you because you represented parts of themselves and their histories that they never properly dealt with. Then Amber came along, social, athletic, conventionally successful, and they poured everything into her because she was safe. She fit the mold their parents had tried to force them into. So I was rejected because I reminded them of their own wounds. I said slowly. I believe so, yes. It doesn't excuse their behavior, but it might help explain it. They're broken people who never healed, Ethan. And broken people can't give what they don't have. The conversation with Margaret provided context I had never considered. My parents weren't villains in a story, they were damaged people perpetuating patterns they themselves had experienced. The realization didn't erase the hurt they had caused, but it helped me see them as flawed humans rather than the all-powerful figures of my childhood. Understanding doesn't mean you need to reconnect, Dr. Winters said when I discussed Margaret's revelations in our next session. Compassion can exist alongside healthy boundaries. As summer turned to fall, Lauren and I found a beautiful craftsman house to buy together. With large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light and a converted garage perfect for a photography studio, it represented the next chapter in our lives. We spent weekends painting walls, planting a garden, and making the space ours. The Belonging exhibition opened at a prestigious gallery downtown, drawing considerable attention in the art community. Standing amid my photographs on opening night, Lauren by my side and surrounded by friends and colleagues who genuinely celebrated my work, I felt a profound sense of arrival. Not just professionally, but personally. The gallery owner introduced me to the arts editor of a major national magazine who was interested in featuring my work. As we discussed potential angles for the article, a familiar figure caught my eye near the entrance. Amber stood alone, looking uncomfortable and out of place in the artistic crowd. She wore a conservative dress that seemed at odds with the bohemian gallery atmosphere, clutching her purse tightly as she scanned the room. When our eyes met, she gave a small, uncertain wave. My stomach tightened. I excused myself from the conversation and approached her, conscious of Lauren watching concernedly from across the room. I didn't expect to see you here, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I saw an article about your exhibition in the Boston Globe, she explained. I was in Seattle for a coaching conference and thought. I don't know what I thought, actually. An awkward silence stretched between us. Your photos are amazing, she finally said. I never really looked at your work before. I should have. Thank you for coming, I replied, unsure what else to say. Can we talk? She asked. Maybe after? Or tomorrow? I'm here until Sunday. I hesitated, weighing the potential for further hurt against the possibility of some resolution. Coffee tomorrow, I decided. There's a place near my house. I'll text you the address. The next morning, Lauren squeezed my hand as I prepared to leave. Remember, you don't owe her anything. If it becomes too much, you can leave. I know, I assured her. I'm not expecting miracles. Just closure, maybe. Amber was already at the cafe when I arrived, 2 cups of coffee on the table. The conversation started awkwardly, with small talk about her flight and the coaching conference. Finally, she took a deep breath. I've been seeing a therapist, she said abruptly. Since January. After you left. I raised my eyebrows, waiting for her to continue. She's helped me see some things about our family. About how I participated in pushing you out. Amber stared into her coffee. I was jealous of you, Ethan. Your intelligence, your talent, your certainty about who you were. I played the role they wanted because it was easier, but I always knew you were the extraordinary one. The admission stunned me. I was jealous of you too, I admitted. For being naturally what they wanted. For belonging effortlessly where I had to struggle. Nobody belonged effortlessly in our house, she said with surprising bitterness. I just performed better. Contorted myself more completely. Do you know I never wanted to play volleyball? I wanted to study marine biology. But that wasn't the Mitchell family way. We talked for nearly 3 hours, peeling back layers of family mythology to reach something closer to truth. Amber revealed that our parents' marriage had been struggling for years, held together primarily by appearances and financial entanglement. After I left at Thanksgiving, the tensions had escalated, with my father blaming my mother for driving me away and my mother retreating into increasingly rigid control of their social calendar. "They won't change, Ethan," Amber said with resignation. "They can't. But I'm trying to. That's why I'm here. Not to ask you to come back or forgive them, but to tell you I'm sorry for my part in it all." Her apology felt genuine, if incomplete. "What about you and Derek? The house, the wedding plans?" A shadow crossed her face. "We're taking a break. Turns out when I started being honest about what I actually want versus what looks good on paper, we had a lot less in common." She attempted a smile. "Turns out the Mitchell family golden child is a bit tarnished too." As we prepared to leave, she asked hesitantly, "Is there room for me?" "In your life, I mean. Not now, maybe, but someday? As just siblings finding our own way?" I considered her question carefully. "I think so. Slowly. With boundaries. And only if it's about building something new, not rehashing the past or acting as a conduit to our parents." She nodded, relief evident in her expression. "That's fair. More than fair, actually." We parted with an awkward hug and a tentative plan to email occasionally. I walked home through the autumn leaves, feeling lighter somehow. Not healed completely, but as though a wound long festering had finally been cleaned, making genuine healing possible. When I told Lauren about the conversation, she listened attentively, then asked, "Do you think you'll ever have contact with your parents again?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Right now, I don't see how that would be healthy for me. Maybe someday, if they show real change or understanding. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not making that my goal." She nodded, understanding. "Your family is what you make it now, Ethan. You get to choose." And I had chosen. As fall turned to winter, Lauren and I married in a simple ceremony surrounded by people who truly saw and valued us. Jason served as my best man, delivering a toast that had everyone alternately laughing and wiping away tears. "Family isn't always who you're born to," he said, raising his glass. "Sometimes it's who you find along the way. Sometimes it's who stays when it would be easier to leave. Sometimes it's who sees the real you and says, 'Yes, that one. I choose that one.'" I sent Amber a few photos from the wedding. She responded with warm congratulations and no mention of our parents' reaction to the news. It was better that way. As the new year began, Lauren and I established our own holiday traditions, celebrating with friends and her family rather than attempting to conform to expectations that had never fit. We volunteered at a youth photography program on Thanksgiving, teaching teenagers how to express their unique perspectives through images. On Christmas, we hosted an orphan dinner for friends without local family, filling our home with laughter and genuine connection. I continued developing the Belonging series, expanding it to include more diverse expressions of family and community. The work led to a book deal with a respected publisher, allowing me to reach an even broader audience with my exploration of chosen family. 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, I realized I no longer checked my phone expecting messages from my parents or felt a pang when seeing happy families in public. The wounds were healing, forming scars that would always be part of me but no longer defined me. Lauren and I sat on our porch swing one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Her hand rested lightly on her stomach, where our first child had just begun to make their presence known. "Are you scared?" she asked softly. "About becoming parents?" "Terrified," I admitted. "But not in the way you might think. I'm not afraid of repeating my parents' patterns. I'm afraid of the normal things keeping this little person safe, helping them grow, making a million inevitable mistakes along the way." "How can you be so sure? About not repeating the patterns?" I considered the question carefully. "Because I've seen them clearly. I've named them. And most importantly, I've chosen a different path deliberately, not just reactively. Our child will be loved for exactly who they are, not who we need them to be." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "They'll have your eyes for seeing beauty in unexpected places. And your heart for creating worlds that help others understand themselves," I added. As darkness fell, we moved inside to the wall where we'd hung family photographs, not just biological family, but the expansive, chosen family we had built together. There, among images of Lauren's parents, our friends, mentors, and colleagues, was the photo of my grandmother Grace on her porch swing, smiling with the same unconditional love I intended to give my own child. I placed my hand over Lauren's on her stomach and made a silent promise to our growing baby: "You will always belong. Exactly as you are. Without condition or comparison. You will be seen, heard, and celebrated for your unique self. The cycle ends here. A new story begins with you." Our wedding day dawned clear and bright, defying Seattle's reputation for rain. The Volunteer Park Conservatory glowed with natural light filtering through the glass ceiling, illuminating arrangements of succulents and wildflowers that Lauren had chosen for their natural, unmanicured beauty. No traditional roses or lilies, this celebration would be as unique as our journey. I stood near the small altar we had created, Jason beside me as best man, watching as our intimate gathering of 60 guests found their seats among the greenery. Lauren's family filled several rows, her parents beaming with genuine happiness. The remaining seats held our chosen family friends from college and work, mentors who had shaped our creative paths, neighbors who had become confidants. When Lauren appeared at the entrance, I felt my breath catch. She wore a simple dress of flowing silk, her dark hair adorned with tiny white flowers. No veil, no train, just Lauren, radiant and entirely herself. As she walked toward me, I thought of all the paths that had led us to this moment, including the painful ones. For the first time, I felt a strange gratitude for even the difficult parts of my journey. Without them, I might never have recognized the rare and precious gift of being truly seen and accepted. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves, promising not perfect love but honest, evolving partnership. When the officiant pronounced us married, the conservatory erupted in genuine celebration, not the polite applause of formal weddings, but the joyful noise of people who understood what this union truly represented. At the reception in a nearby art gallery, Jason's toast brought both laughter and tears. "I've known Ethan since our first day of college," he said, raising his glass. "I watched him transform from someone who never quite believed he deserved to take up space in the world to a man who knows exactly who he is and stands firmly in that truth. Lauren, you didn't just love him, you helped him see what some of us knew all along, that he is exceptional, not despite his differences but because of them." He turned to address the room at large. "They say blood is thicker than water, but that's actually a misquote. The full saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the bonds we choose are often stronger than those we're born into. Looking around this room, I see the family Ethan and Lauren have built through choice and commitment. That's something worth celebrating." Later, as Lauren and I moved among our guests, her father pulled me aside. "I meant what I said at the lake last year," he told me, his hand warm on my shoulder. "Your family now, not just because you married my daughter, but because that's how we see you. I want you to know that." "Thank you," I replied, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. "That means more than I can express." As we settled into married life, Lauren and I established our own traditions and rhythms. Thanksgiving became not a dreaded family obligation but a day we dedicated to giving back through the youth photography program. Christmas evolved into a warm gathering of friends without local family. We celebrated solstices and equinoxes, marking the turning of seasons with small rituals that connected us to the natural world rather than conforming to expectations that had never fit either of us. The Belonging exhibition traveled to galleries across the country, touching people in ways I never anticipated. I received hundreds of messages from viewers who saw their own family struggles reflected in the images, many sharing their stories of estrangement, reconciliation, or the creation of chosen families. The experience reminded me that even our most personal pain can, when transformed through art, become a bridge to others. 6 months after our wedding, I received an invitation to a solo exhibition at a prestigious New York gallery. Lauren and I traveled together, making a vacation of the trip. The opening night drew an impressive crowd of critics, collectors, and photography enthusiasts. As I moved through the space, discussing my work with interested visitors, I felt a profound sense of professional arrival. Near the end of the evening, as the crowd began to thin, I noticed a familiar figure standing before a photograph of two elderly men who had been best friends for over 60 years. My sister Amber, studying the image with genuine interest. Amber? I approached cautiously, unsure of her presence at my New York opening. She turned, a tentative smile forming. Surprise. I hope it's okay that I came. I saw the write-up in the Times and had a teaching conference in the city this weekend. Of course it's okay, I said, surprised to find I meant it. I'm glad you're here. We stood awkwardly for a moment before she gestured to the photograph. This one really got to me. The way they're looking at each other like they've seen everything and still choose to stay. They met in the Korean War, I explained. Stanley lost both legs, and Malcolm stayed by his hospital bed for 3 months. They've been inseparable ever since, though neither identifies as gay. They just call themselves family. Amber nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking a lot about that word. Family. What it means versus what we're told it means. After the gallery closed, Lauren suggested we all get dinner. Over pasta at a small Italian restaurant, Amber shared updates on her life. She and Derek had officially ended their engagement, a decision that had scandalized our parents, but brought her unexpected relief. I'm teaching biology now, she said with genuine enthusiasm. Marine ecosystems. Finally using that degree I got in secret while also coaching volleyball. In secret? Lauren asked. Amber nodded. Mom and Dad thought I was just taking easy science classes to maintain eligibility for sports. They never knew I was pursuing a full biology degree. When I finally told them after graduation, Dad asked why I'd waste time on something that wouldn't lead to a proper career for a woman. The revelation shifted something in my understanding of our family dynamics. So you were performing too? I said quietly. Just in different ways. Always, she confirmed. The perfect, athletic daughter routine was exhausting. But it was safer than being myself. She hesitated, then added, I wanted to tell you about Mom and Dad. My body tensed instinctively. What about them? They're separating. Dad moved out 3 months ago. He's claiming it's temporary, but... She shrugged. The facade is crumbling. After you left, they couldn't maintain the perfect family illusion anymore, even between themselves. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, sadness for their pain, a small vindication that the family mythology was finally being acknowledged as fiction, and most surprisingly, a detached compassion. Their struggles were their own now, not wounds for me to carry. I'm sorry they're going through that, I said sincerely. But I can't be involved. I know, Amber assured me. I'm not asking you to be. I just thought you should know. They still ask about you sometimes. Mom saw your book in a store window last month and bought it. She keeps it on the coffee table. Have they changed? Lauren asked gently. Truly? Amber considered the question carefully. In some ways. In others, not at all. They're products of their own upbringing, their own wounds. Understanding that has helped me forgive some things, but it doesn't mean I'll accept the same treatment going forward. As we parted that night, Amber hugged me genuinely for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. I'm proud of you, Ethan. I should have said that a long time ago. I'm proud of you too, I replied, meaning it. For finding your own way. Back in Seattle, life continued its forward momentum. The success of Belonging led to new opportunities, teaching positions at photography workshops, speaking engagements at universities, commission projects for major publications. I approached each with the confidence of someone who had finally found his place in the world. Lauren's illustration career flourished as well, her distinctive watercolor style gracing an award-winning series of children's books about emotional intelligence. We converted part of our home into a shared studio space, often working side by side in companionable silence broken only by occasional requests for feedback or celebratory announcements of completed projects. When Lauren discovered she was pregnant, We shared the news first with her family, who responded with joyful tears and immediate offers of support. We waited until the second trimester to tell Amber, who had become a more regular presence in our lives through occasional emails and video calls. "I'm going to be an aunt?" she exclaimed, her face lighting up on the computer screen. "That's amazing! When are you due?" "October," Lauren replied, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "We're still processing it ourselves." "Have you told Mom and Dad?" Amber asked cautiously. I shook my head. "No. And I'm not planning to, at least not directly. I know you keep in touch with them, and I don't expect you to keep secrets. You can tell them if it comes up naturally. But I don't want official announcements or expectations of grandparent roles." Amber nodded understanding. "I respect that. Your child, your rules." As Lauren's pregnancy progressed, I found myself reflecting more deeply on my own childhood and the kind of parent I wanted to be. I spent hours reading parenting books, not seeking perfect methods but trying to understand the psychological needs of children at different developmental stages. "You're going to be an amazing father," Lauren assured me one night as we sorted through tiny clothes donated by her cousins. "You know exactly what not to do." "Knowing what not to do is only half the equation," I replied. "I need to know what to do instead." "Trust yourself," she said simply. "You have more wisdom than you realize." In my therapy sessions with Dr. Winters, we began focusing on preparation for fatherhood and the inevitable triggers that might arise. "It's normal to worry about repeating patterns," she told me. "The fact that you're conscious of that possibility already puts you ahead. But remember that good parenting isn't about perfection, it's about repair. You'll make mistakes. All parents do. The difference is in how you handle those mistakes." "By acknowledging them," I said. "By apologizing genuinely and making changes." "Exactly. Children don't need perfect parents. They need parents who take responsibility and grow alongside them." As Lauren entered her third trimester, we transformed our guest room into a nursery. I built shelves for books and toys, while Lauren painted a mural of a night sky filled with constellations both real and imagined. We chose furniture for function rather than appearance, prioritizing comfort over style. One afternoon, while assembling the crib, I found myself unexpectedly overwhelmed with emotion. Lauren found me sitting on the floor surrounded by parts and instructions, tears streaming down my face. "What is it?" she asked, lowering herself carefully to sit beside me. "I just realized something." I managed through the tears. "Our child will never question if they belong. Not for a single day. They'll know with absolute certainty that they are wanted and loved exactly as they are." Lauren leaned her head against my shoulder. "That's the greatest gift we can give them." In October, after 26 hours of labor that tested both our endurance, our daughter Lily Grace Mitchell came into the world with a powerful cry and alert eyes that seemed to take in everything. As I held her for the first time, her tiny hand wrapping around my finger, I made a silent promise: "You will always know you are enough. Exactly as you are." The first months of parenthood were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and moments of such transcendent joy they seemed almost unreal. Lauren and I navigated the challenges together, taking turns with night feedings and finding humor in the inevitable disasters of new parenthood. Her parents visited regularly, providing support without overstepping, modeling the kind of grandparenting we both appreciated. Amber met Lily when she was 3 months old, during a visit to Seattle. The moment she held her niece, a look of wonder transformed her face. "She has your eyes," she told me. "That same way of really seeing things." As Lily grew from infant to toddler, I documented her development not just in photographs but in detailed journal entries, wanting to preserve not just how she looked but who she was becoming, her preferences, her emerging personality, the unique way she experienced the world. I was determined that she would always know she had been seen and valued for her authentic self. On Lily's first birthday, we hosted a small celebration in our backyard. As I watched her toddle among adoring friends and family, covered in cake and radiating joy, I realized how completely my definition of family had transformed. It was no longer about shared DNA or obligation. It was about chosen connection, mutual respect, and the daily decision to see and honor each other's true selves. That evening, after the guests had gone and Lily was asleep in her crib, Lauren and I sat on the porch swing, much as my grandmother and I had done years before. "I've been thinking about forgiveness," I said, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Not the kind that excuses or forgets, but the kind that releases." "Releases what?" Lauren asked. "The expectation that things should have been different. The hope that they might still change. The power the past has to determine my future." I turned to look at her. "I think I'm finally ready to forgive my parents, not for their sake but for my own. Not to reconnect, necessarily, but to fully let go." Lauren squeezed my hand. "That's not a small thing." "No," I agreed. "But carrying anger requires energy. I'd rather invest in our family, the one we're building with intention and love." The journey from rejection to belonging had been long and often painful. There were still moments when old insecurities surfaced or memories caught me off guard. But those moments no longer defined me. I had learned that belonging isn't something you're given or denied by others, it's something you create through authentic connection and the courage to be fully yourself. As Lily grows, she will face her own challenges and forge her own path. But she will do so knowing she is anchored in unconditional love, free to explore who she truly is without fear of rejection. The legacy of conditional acceptance ends with me. My daughter will inherit instead the wisdom of my grandmother Grace, who understood that true family sees, celebrates, and makes room for each person's unique gifts. If you're watching this and my story resonates with your own experience of family struggles, I want you to know you're not alone. The pain of not belonging is real, but it doesn't have to be permanent. Whether you find healing through reconciliation or by building a chosen family of your own, you deserve to be seen and valued for exactly who you are. Have you found your own sense of belonging? Share your story in the comments below, and if this journey spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember, sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we're born into.